These are the worked out solutions for the practice test for Chapter 4. So let's take a look at our first type of problem. It asks us to find the best estimate for this subtraction problem. And the key to remember for estimating is when we're dealing with adding and subtracting, we want to round to the nearest half. And so we look to see, is 5/8 closer to 1/2, or is it closer to 1 or 0? Which one's it closer to? Well, take half of 8. So if you take half of 8, that equals 4. And you see how 4 is close to 5. So I would call this about 6.5. Over here, you see how 2/9. Well, if you take half of 9, that makes 4.5. Half of 9 is 4.5. And if I look at 2, is 2 closer to 0, or is it closer to 4.5? Well, if I subtract 2 from 4.5, that makes 2.5. If I subtract 2 from 0 from 2, that makes 2. So I would call 2/9 closer to just 0, so just be 4. And so if I was to subtract these two numbers, I'd end up with 2 1/2. Now, if you ended up with just 2, that's because you had 2/9 as 1/2, but it is a little bit closer to 0 than it is closer to 1/2. Well, taking a look at the next one, it's a multiplication problem, and with multiplication, we just round to the nearest number, so the nearest whole number. Again, we want to make the problem go quick, and so we don't want to have to deal with 1/2 when we're multiplying. When we're adding or subtracting, it's not so difficult. So 7/9 is closer to 1, so that's why I'm going to round this to 9. Again, this is close to 1, so this is close to 9. And 1/4 is closer to 0, so I would just keep this as 3 and then multiply, and I get 27 as our answer. Well, here we're adding two fractions, so now we actually need to come up with a common denominator. So I look at these two numbers, and I'm going to break down that 10 to 5 and 2, and I break down the 15 to 5 and 3. So what the 15 needs is a 2, so I'm going to multiply it by 2 over 2. I'll multiply this 3/10 by 3 over 3. So I multiply across, and this is what I get, 9/30, and I'm going to add on to that as 16/30. 16 because the 8 times 2 makes 16. So I add those two numbers, and it leaves me with 25/30. However, that is not reduced. I need to take out the common factor from those two numbers. So I'm going to reduce that fraction. And when I take out the 5 from both of those numbers, I end up with 5 over 6. So 5/6 is our answer for number 3. Same sort of thing on this one. I'm going to break this down to common factors. 4 and 3 make 12, where 4 and 5 make 20. Now I could break the 4 down further, but I see it's already common between the two. 5 and 3 have no common factors, so that tells me that the 20 needs an extra 3. So that's what the 12 has that the 20 doesn't. But the 12 doesn't have that extra 5, so we'll multiply it by 5 over 5. So I multiply across, I get 35/60 minus 27/60. And then I just do the subtraction, and that leaves me with 8/60. But it's still not simplified. I could take out a common factor. And the big number is 4. If you start with 2, you're okay. You can get there eventually, but this will get us there a little bit quicker. And when I go ahead and do the division, 4 goes into 8 2 times. 4 goes into 68 15 times. So 2/15 is our answer. Next one, we are adding two mixed numbers together. And so when I add mixed numbers, I like to write them in a column format. So I'll go ahead and rewrite the numbers here. And so that is a 2 and 3/8. So the reason I do this is so that I can add up those fractions. They're in line with one another. It's easier to deal with them. So I see 5 and 8 have nothing in common. So I'm just going to multiply by the other's denominator. So I'm going to multiply this one by 8 over 8, this one by 5 over 5. So I go ahead and do that, and that leaves me with an 8/40. And over here I have 15/40. Now I'm adding, so I can go ahead and add up those fractions. And so 8 plus 15, that gives me 23. So I have 23/40, and then I add up the whole numbers, 2 plus 2, and that makes 4. So 4 and 23/40. Well, in the next problem, I end up having to subtract, and so I need to watch for the borrowing that can go on here. So 9 and 8/15, and then I have 7 and 5/6. So I come up with a common denominator. Now, I see 30 goes into, or both these numbers go into 30. So I'm going to multiply this 8 fifteenths by a number that makes 30, and that's 2. And so if I multiply this one by 5, then I'll also get 30. So when I multiply across, I get 16 thirtieths. Here I get 25 thirtieths. And I mentioned about borrowing, and I'll have to do it here because, you see, if I tried to do the subtraction, I would end up with a negative number, 16 minus 25. So I need to borrow from 9, change it to an 8. And that means I need to add 1 to this fraction. So adding 1 is like adding 30 thirtieths. And so I go ahead and do that, and that gives me 46 thirtieths. And so now I can go ahead and subtract. 46 minus 25, when I do that subtraction, I'm left with 21 thirtieths. And I do the subtraction here, 8 minus 7 leaves me with 1. But I'm not done yet. You see, you can take out that common factor. See, they both have a common factor of 3 in that fraction. So my final answer, once I do that division, I'm going to end up with 7 over 10. So my final answer is 1 7/10. Well, here we have to multiply some fractions, so look for common factors. See, 10 and 4, we can divide both of those numbers by 2. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'll change that to a 5, and 4 goes 2 into 4 goes 2 times. And so then I can multiply across. So I have 7 times 2, and then I have the 5 times the 5. And so I go ahead and multiply, that leaves me with 14 over 25. Well, our next problem is a mixed number, and we're multiplying with a fraction. So I got to change that mixed number to an improper fraction. So it's going to be 5 times 9 plus the 5, all divided by 9. And then we're multiplying by 3/5. So I've got to multiply first and then add. So it makes 45 and 5 make 50 ninths. And I'm multiplying by 3/5. And so when I do that, I see some canceling I could do. So I have the 5 goes into 50 10 times, 3 goes into 9 3 times. So I'm left with 10 thirds. And I just go ahead and do the division. 3 into 10, and that goes in there 3 times with 1 left over. And so 3 1/3 is the answer. Well, looking at our next one, it's a division problem. And so we'll go ahead and take the reciprocal of that second fraction, multiply by 3 over 1. And no cross canceling now, so we'll just have to multiply across. I'm left with 27/14. So we get to go ahead and do that division. 14 into 27 goes in there, let's see, just 1 time. 2 times would be 28. So when I do the subtraction, I'm almost left with 14, but not quite. So I write the answer as 1 13/14. Number 10, it says Karen works at a toy store. She has 2 7/8 pounds of marbles. She is dividing the marbles into 1/16 pound packages. How many packages will she have? Well, the word divides means that we're going to end up dividing. We're dividing 2 7/8 by 1/16. And so when we do that, we've got to change this to an improper fraction. So 2 times 8 plus the 7, all over 8. So we go ahead and do that work. That's 16 plus 7 leaves me with 23. 23/8, and I am multiplying by the reciprocal, so 16 over 1. And so when I go ahead and do that work, I can look for some cross canceling, which I do see here. And I see that 8 goes into 16 2 times, and I can multiply across. I'd end up with 46 packages. So make sure you put some units on those, because always put units on the problem so we understand what the answer represents. So looking at our last one on this page, we are subtracting 8 5/6 from x. So that means I need to do an opposite operation. I'll need to end up adding 8 5/6 to both sides. So when I add 8 5/6, I need to come up with a common denominator. And so when I do that, I'm going to end up multiplying the 5/6 by 2 over 2. That makes 10/12. And when I add the 7/12 and the 10/12, that makes a total of 17/12. And the 8, and there's no other number there, so just 8 17/12. But that's not a whole number there. This is 17/12 is not a proper fraction, so I'm going to divide 12 into 17. It goes 1 time with 5 left over. So that makes 1 and 5/12. So I could rewrite this, because a mixed number is just a whole number, and I'm adding on a part, which is 1 and 5/12. So that makes a total of 9 and 5/12. Well, that's the first half of the test, and we'll check out part 2 for the second half.